Okay, welcome back. Here we are on the next day. You know, after the Creative Astrophysics 101 video, part one. Here's part two. Excuse all of my normalities as a human being and everything like that, like spitting and smoking. I know it's terrible, but I don't care. And I'm still going to talk about what I know. Okay. So today, candid, right? So today I'm going to talk about dark matter, black holes. And most people think of black holes being spelled as Holes. No, there's W at the beginning. Wholes. So the big factor about dark matter, black holes, in coordinates with protons, neutrons, electrons, quarks, what the fuck ever names they make up these days, is that when it comes to dark matter, there's not particularly only one type of dark matter. See, dark matter is like a classification. Proton is like a classification. Electron is a classification. They're not types of atomic materials. Quark is more like a type in comparison. Okay. Basically, the best way to describe uh, dark material or productive material, etc., etc., usually what neutrons are made of, productive materials, um, that they're mostly dominated or dominating neutrons. um, I'm going to use words like kernel and shell and pixel. I'll be using the word pixel as an adjective or an adverb. Um, and some other words are typically mostly understood. So let's go ahead and get started. See, the best way to describe uh, black holes relative to dark matter is by describing dark matter first relative to general elements, compounds, and classifications and types. You see, dark matter isn't necessarily negative um, or, or positive. Dark matter is more like extremely seasoned atomic material over long periods of time. You see, and the best way to describe it relatively is to say there was a quark. It was part of an H2O molecule. But then during another time period, it was part of a sodium nitrate compound. And then during another time period, it was part of a uranium compound, or so on and so forth. The point is that these atomic materials attain imbuement through their time frame, bonded and part of the compounds. In essence of protons, like I said in the previous video, are not exactly large in comparison proportionally to the other general classifications. Protons, most most purely as relation to a type in general, are very small, self-compressed, as in their core will use as much of its attained energy to hold the other types of materials like quarks, etc., together as a very very compact atom. This creates the facade that it's just one little particle. However, there are countless particles. Even from in the size of your hand to the size of a galaxy, being represented as, having a core with satellites, which could be related to thinking of as electrons or protons or as a neutron or whatever, what have you. So, like I was saying, the dark matter, sometimes it's that the spectrum of material and particles will forever be growing with descriptions, will forever grow with more and more descriptions over time, rather than the belief that space, material, and existence is forever expanding and growing and becoming more material. It's more so that the materials are morphing into other descriptions over longer periods of time, and without like a centrality of feed to produce more base materials that will later mutate or morph into newer descriptions or materials, etc., like dark matter or protons or neutrons, etc., with their own specific types within their classifications. It wouldn't seem like the universe or existence is forever growing and expanding. And like I said, it's that the spectrum of descript materials, the descriptions, the titles, the labels are becoming more fully developed. And it's like saying there were 5 types, but 10 billion years later, there are 500,000 types. So basically the way that it works, like I was saying with dark material, you had a quark, it was part of H2O, it was part of, what did I say, sodium nitrate? It was part of sodium chloride, sodium nitrate. It doesn't really matter. It's vague description. And it was part of uranium or whatever. It was imbued with certain tones of resonant or radiating or aura worth of energies or bonding and fusion or fission qualities. So essentially it's like saying it looked like a wheel, then it started to look like a cog over time because of its amount of time as part of an H2O molecule. Then it started to look like 2 cogs intersected, and so on and so forth. And it kept growing abilities to bond with other materials, and so on and so forth. This is what dark matter is. Dark matter is essentially the matter that maintains bonds between elementary elements or rudimentary elements, etc., etc., like H2O or sodium, or just hydrogen, or just oxygen, so on and so forth. Again. So the big part is, over time, this little quark may break away from an element or a particle, etc., but it will not abandon the congruency and ability to bond, or the code, so to speak, of how to be part of or handle the other material. So all of these dark matters are out there like clouds, and these dark matters are so magnitudinal in comparison to other materials that because of their general congruency factor and diverse capability to be a part of any part of the spectrum of material out there, that essentially they are the general shell appearance of what you would see on a black hole. Now, in order to describe a black hole, you'll have to understand that most representatively, the occurrence of a black hole forming, existing, and developing beyond being a black hole goes along this 1, 2, 3 step-by-step description. The dark matter will be lying in wait, like a predator or jaguar or whatever, snake. But it's not predatorial. It's lying in wait for all of these neutron masses to essentially come into proximity. Now, I wouldn't say that they're baiting these neutron masses. However, they're attracting them based on what exactly this dark matter wants to form, so to speak, or is capable of forming, rather than wants to, because it's not really living material. However, it has a capability, and that naturally is cause for attractions between materials, etc. Basically, a neutron mass is within proximity of a dark matter cloud. Part of the cloud is capable of combining or symbiosing along with that neutron mass to form a greater scale of materials through the future. And that dark matter has the magnitude, capacity, and capability to not only, like I said, there's different kinds of dark matter, not only so to speak vacuum seal, compress, or refrigerate, so to say, materials, but it also has in some cases of dark matter, the matter has the capability to work out the bonds and the compounds, so to speak, to make the material more substantial or stronger. Like to say, this block of uranium is quote unquote this radioactive or has this large of a energy field, but this block of uranium has 10 times that magnitudinal capability or 10 times that energy field scale, proportion, etc. This is because of that capability to maintain or strengthen the bonds so that the bonds and the material is capable of having a larger field or a stronger field, etc., etc. So this neutron mass is not necessarily floating, but more like drifting along near this massive cloud of dark matter. Now, another part about dark matter is that trying to travel through a cloud of dark matter is still like trying to travel through a black hole. Most likely, you will be compressed and spaghettified, as they say, into the cloud. And either A, uh, you'll make it through to the other side, or B, you will expend all of your fuel trying to get through that cloud in comparison to maybe expending 1/millionth of your fuel storage by just going around that cloud. This is what causes that distortion of time effect. It's not necessarily like, it's not necessarily quite literally like, that the video where the professor has like a sheet of spandex or whatever, a sheet of like Under Armour or whatever material, really sleek stuff, and drops a weight in the middle and throws marbles around it, and it's not like that stick where it just like repels stuff. It doesn't repel things, so to speak, most naturally. Most representatively as well, it's more so that weight is the factor of attractions. Those marbles are the factor of compounds that are stable, compounds that need nothing else, but yet want to be part of a system, or naturally will be part of a system, etc., etc. Like the marble is a planet, the large weight in the middle is a star. However, this cloud of dark matter is literally a cloud. However, it's quite literally the basis of black hole, the shell, the general inter-external around the kernel, which I'm going to describe, or the neutron mass, the nucleus, as they say. Nucleus is mostly a biology term. I'm not really not trying to use that term anymore in this discussion. Now, majoritively, you'll find that this neutron mass traveling around this dark matter cloud is actually about yay close to essentially transforming, as they say, or morphing into a proton mass. Proton mass, in essence, is like saying that it's projecting a positivity field where it is attempting to attract other materials to neutralize it into no longer projecting a field, essentially to satisfy a desire. My filter cigars, by the way. In that instance where the neutron mass is transitioning into a proton mass, etc., the occurrence of a part of a dark matter cloud, say like a plume, taking grasp or taking hold of that neutron mass, is essentially what's referred to as a black hole forming. Though it be finalized, finished, filled, fulfilled, unfulfilled, etc., the reality is that this neutron mass may know as a core. The core may be seeking out specifics. However, the rest of the surrounding mass is seeking other things, and as well on the precipice of breaking its bonds away, and the neutron mass is no longer as much of a mass. The dark matter will take grasp of this mass uh, upon the instance, the precise timing of the mass transitioning to projecting a field for attraction purpose, attracting other material. Essentially, the rest of the mass is upset or ignored, or not tended to by the core of the mass. This is where the dark matter comes in, takes hold of that instant transition, that moment of transition, and rather than the neutron per se projecting a field for attraction purpose, the dark matter accentuates that instantaneous projection transition to projection, basically extending the amount of time of the full projection quality of the entire mass, rather than just the core projection of the nuclear, or of the neutronic mass. Therein also, the dark matter has a wide variety of atonements, of season congruencies, of being part of many other materials' bonds, etc., holds the codes, so to speak, of atomic bonding, fusions, and fissions, etc., and is essentially like the best well-rounded spice or seasoning for a food, or so on and so forth. Really brings the dish together, so to speak. Now, this plume of dark matter will essentially form spherical grasp of this kernel. The kernel, of course, the source of the information, or the source of materials seeking out bonds, or seeking to relinquish itself of specific quarks, etc., within its bonds, of the materials, and so on and so forth, and will then thus begin to travel towards its many atonements, where it has kept essentially a strung out bond discrepancy, or strung out congruency bond, kind of like not burning the bridge, don't burn your bridges kind of thing. But it will start to travel to each different range of materials that it has kept atonement about as the material, wherein has essentially gone its separate way, and so has the dark matter material, blah, blah, blah. Not necessarily blah, 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 very interesting. But as well as this occurring, this neutron mass is essentially being compressed, or collapsed, but compressed, This is completely pressed in. This is not only to prolong the duration of its projected attempt to form bonds amidst the vast void of space. And the reason that space is more of a void than a vacuum, even though it's a similar terminology, there's not necessarily a seal holding it all in. It's not like a terrarium. It is more so like material. Material may have been like a neutron mass. However, over time, the gap between different particles, etc., caused void instead of vacuum, because there are so many particles that it's not necessarily a singular vacuum. It's a void. Make sense? So it's like to say there are Googles, billions, trillions, Googles, quadrillions, whatever word you want to use, worth of terrariums, which are not intersecting or layered on top of each other or anything. They're quite literally more like, first it looked like a tube, then it looked like maybe 6 tubes, and it was, or first it looked like this, then it looked like this, but in reality, instead of it looking like this from other angles, it's quite literally like one item or object. So it's like a void of multiple vacuum occurrences. Essentially, within that void, any material left behind or trapped is or lost or rejected or repelled or whatever you want to call it, is seeking out what it cannot find. So essentially the material inside has lost all of the other material, which has traveled away. However, the material that's traveled away isn't lost or hasn't lost the material within the void. Dark matter is material in the void that has not lost any of the other materials which cause the void. And this is because it did not relinquish its congruency codes or capabilities to bond, etc. Whereas other materials within the void, like protons, electrons, neutrons, negatrons, megatrons, did relinquish their capabilities. Though there may be an orbital type of or core inside of a star, wherein on that where in comparison to the core of the star, it is parallel with its negative reciprocal, whereas, like to say, on the larger side of the ellipse, the attraction core, the quote-unquote positive core, is on the side of the star that the planet is, and the repulsing core, which keeps the planet when coming in close proximity to the star, repelled away from the star instead of being sucked into the star, causes the orbital field, the complex of the system. You'll find that these kinds of bonds in a more like handful of atomic material instance, which is more like a black hole instance, even though it's more proportionately representative of the scale of a galaxy or multiple galaxies within that black hole, is that these orbital planes and so on and so forth are essentially formed because of the black hole's pixelation and quote-unquote workout plan for the bonds and the energy fields of the material that it's maintaining or preserving during its journey through its multiple atonements and locating knowledges of other materials. Essentially, it is forming a galaxy, compressing it and preserving it, waiting for it to be essentially fulfilled around that kernel at the center, which will essentially be the core of the galaxy. Now, just to put a couple of images into your mind, you have the general petri dish or disc-shaped galaxy format, like the Milky Way, or you have, let's see, in perspective from the Milky Way, from Earth, you have like the Orion systems within the Orion Nebula, so on and so forth, where it's not necessarily disc-shaped. You have essentially an architected or structured pillar or complex of more than petri disk or disc-shaped galactic representation. It's more like, instead of it being like one disk, which contains multiple systems within its many points, which hold, like systems which are more represent of what you would find in the Orion systems, where you have a core with multiple stars orbiting around it, and those stars holding planets and moons orbiting around them. Which is what makes them a little bit more beautiful than the Petries, because it's essentially a lot more difficult to achieve. But you'll find that after this mass of dark matter surrounding the kernel, which is a black hole, has essentially collected sufficient amount of material, and so on and so forth, designing its galaxy, etc. It has essentially formed a galaxy waiting to unfold. And it could look like either like the Orion systems, not necessarily disk-like, or it could look more like Andromeda or the Milky Way, majoritively disk-like in fuller perspective of appearance. Once the kernel is satisfied, beyond simply satisfaction. Once it is to a peak, once it has met a peak of stimulation, uh, it will essentially, rather than turn back to a neutron, become more aptly productive or forefronted into producing as a galaxy. So then this dark matter will, rather than maintain its grasp and maintain its preservation of the material which it has collected and essentially formed as planets, etc., blah, 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 stars, and so on and so forth, compressed, preserved. Uh, Mind you also that this dark material has the capability to preserve and prolong uh, um, in, enormous amounts of potential energies before kineticizing or igniting or putting on track that material. This galaxy will start to unfold. This dark matter, after doing all of its pixeling, after nitpicking um, this bond or that bond, this material with this material or not, so on and so forth, this quark with this quark, this electron with this proton, this blah, 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 essentially forming the galaxy as well around the kernel in coordination with the kernel, rather than just dominating the kernel into doing it, as the kernel sometimes holds its own dark material, dark matter within its core, or not worth or value of materials, particles. It will essentially begin to unfold. People think of this as chaos, etc. It's not really. Within this chaos realm of reality, in which case there are many realms, within this chaos realm, where the materials are literally protected like a national park, so to speak, of raw nature and raw natural formulations and so on and so forth. There is, and this is beneath a large plane or cloud of dark matter. These massive planes or clouds of dark matter are what separate the realms, so to speak. It's not necessarily like it's a bubble. It's not necessarily like you're in a black hole all the time, no matter what. No. It's more like there's a plane here and a plane here, and there's like a small intersection that looks like that instead of like that, like at the corner or so on and so forth. It could look like it's just two planes harboring a void within it, or it could literally and fully encompass, but it doesn't necessarily bubble, because dark material doesn't have that kind of nature. But these are the kinds of things that separate the realms of reality. And within this chaos realm, which the Milky Way, etc., Andromeda, some other galaxies, so on and so forth, to be honest, there are many chaos realms. There are many other sacred realms, so to speak, or secular, or different realms, magical realms. Basically, it's just another way of bottling or containing materials. And just to put it to a finality there, the videos are like 40 minutes. It took me like 6 hours to get the last 40-minute video uploaded from my phone. So this is, I'm going to call it a stopping point and go on later. But within this chaos realm, the preserved natural occurrences of material is the very basis of it being a chaos realm, where life isn't truly compended to thrive or even form, except as a reciprocal to imbalances of systems, of solar systems, etc. These imbalances naturally occur. It's like there wasn't enough material to gather to correctly balance this, etc. or that. And essentially a galaxy is like a playground to a being, or a home, or a little park, so to speak. And this is absolutely why you'll find biologically that it's known that every cell of a body is replaced over a duration of quote unquote 7 years, or dog years are 7 years worth in comparison to one actual Earth year, as they say. Basically, that's a balancing act as well. Also, the the basis is that over extensive amounts of time, you'll come to find that though you may believe the Milky Way is rather decent in proportion to comparison, uh, trying to see through dark matter clouds, uh, whether they be very sparse or thin or vaguely speaking much less dense than you would see like a big pocket of really densified cloud, is what causes distortion no matter what kind of lens you're using to date, and no matter how capable your eyes are. It causes distortion about ratios of proportion, and it'll confuse your brain about what your eyes perceive. So essentially, this is the actual factor, and it'll also distort any kind of light waves, rays, or frequencies traveling through it, just like it would if it was compressing or essentially prolonging the time that it would take for a spaceship to travel through the cloud. It makes sense? If it doesn't make sense to you, just think about it for a while, or comment or post about it to me, and I'll respond. Also, the big factor is that, in essence, like I was saying, the body replaces all of its cells with over a 7-year duration. It's a known scientific description, as they say, rudimentarily, whatever. It's not very well talked about. It's not exactly so experimented or proven, or so they say. However, if it didn't, just like you know that your skin cells die and flake away, and soil your bed sheets, and that's why you have to wash your bed or wash your sheets and so on and so forth. All of the cells. If it didn't, you would essentially be harboring dead cell material. So you have to waste it and replace it. Elsewise, you're essentially spoiling and rotting. And becoming quite possibly disease in the future for the rest of life. Or virus. This is a major factor. Especially to your own family genetic tree or genus family tree, etc. Or others, no matter what kind of breeding tactics you try to use, it will still happen. It will especially still happen to your own. But biology is another subject. There'll be other videos on that later. Right now, we're just going to end the video. And to sum up even more, intelligent life in comparison to raw material, which is not intelligent, is substantially a very different entity rather than material. And like I was saying about life forming to reciprocate an imbalance, it's like there's to put it into scale of retrospect, as to say it's like a vinyl record, an old 32 or whatever, vinyl record where you put the needle down on it and it starts playing while it's spinning. It's like saying that the needle is damaged or malfunctioning or is not capable of transmitting the record's playback properly, and it causes a static sound, or it causes a scratch sound, so on and so forth, or it damages the disc, the record, the vinyl itself. Life will form to reciprocate and cushion that misbalance, that imbalance, that miscalculation there. And essentially life in the chaos realm forms to absorb and essentially backfill to balance the general system of materials and keep cataclysmic destructions from occurring, which would damage the planes of dark material, and or like what the dark material is there to prevent from occurring might be cataclysmic enough to destroy other pockets of galactic or existence or whatever, galactic materials and so on and so forth, because like I said, it's a great void where this dark material is essentially separating into smaller voids or creating walls between voids to essentially protect the different pockets or areas or cultivations or collections of materials from being destroyed by each other, just because this one pocket became too unstable and exploded. As you know, you could have an explosion the size of a pack of cigarettes within a atmosphere. But when you put it into retrospect of a vacuum environment or a void environment, that explosion can quite capably fill the entire vacuum or void if it is the size of a 18-wheeler Mack truck, so to speak, from the same amount of material. So geomancy and alchemy are very dangerous topics, and this is majoritively why you will not necessarily ever find life professing or teaching about how-tos or etc., etc. In fact, life will often neglect to teach about even the truth or the reality of the existence in general, just to protect and keep the possibility of life surviving continually. We're going to stop this video and we're going to call it a day. If I can squeeze another video in later, that'd be awesome. I do have some classwork to do. I'm not a college professor or PhD holding individual. I graduated from high school and I took a little bit of college. I really wasn't interested in taking classes on physics. Clearly, you could probably tell why I didn't want to spend time taking classes on physics. The big thing is that math isn't exactly accurate most often. When it gets into the different ranges of physics, and so on and so forth. And then, I have passions that can be fulfilled with other professions. So essentially, I'm in a design program. After that first trolley through schooling in the university range of education. I'm not going to tell you any more of that, though. But we're going to have another video. I do apologize if at times it's too quiet or too loud. It's not really a big concern of mine. I'm sure you can deal with it. But thank you, and have a great day. Like I said, if I can squeeze another video in, I will. But this one's probably going to take me all day to get uploaded. But at least I'll get it onto Facebook instead of YouTube first, right? Anyway, thank you, and have a good day. Again, my name is Joseph Wesley Cross, and this is Creative Astrophysics 101.